This is Talking Foreign Policy, a critical look at Canada's role abroad, and I'm Eve Engler. Today we are talking about Elizabeth May and some of her foreign policy decisions after yesterday, October 7th. Elizabeth May was scheduled to attend a ceremony put on by the Israeli embassy in Ottawa, co-hosted with CIJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. And this, of course, is amidst Israel's Holocaust in Gaza, amidst its terror campaign, violence in Lebanon, and provocations and escalations with Iran, Yemen, and across the region. To discuss this development last night and also Elizabeth May's foreign policy more broadly, we have the leader of the Green Party of Quebec, Alex Tyrrell. Alex, thanks a lot for doing this interview. And can you just tell us a little bit about what transpired with what Elizabeth May was going to do, attending the ceremony, and then a statement that she put out and more?
Yeah, so Elizabeth May is sort of known for playing both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Just a few days ago, she was in the House of Commons saying, that Netanyahu is a war criminal and that sort of thing. But then when the October 7th anniversary rolled around, she put out this statement essentially in support of Israel and employed some very strange terminology. At one point in the statement, she talks about, that to bring a ceasefire and that sort of thing, and acknowledges some Palestinian suffering, but then follows it up by this quote: "But the bell that tolls the loudest is for those souls lost in the diabolical attacks of October 7th." So it's Jewish supremacy, in my view, to say that for some reason, the people that were killed on October 7th have a higher value than all of the people who have been killed since. And when we look at the statistics, there's 25 Palestinians killed for every Israeli killed since October 7th, 2023. And a lot of people say that those numbers are very conservative and that the real amount could be much higher. So it's very odd to put out a statement that says that that this suffering is sort of like worse, or that it's has a larger value, or that God thinks that these lives are worth more than the ones on the other side.
Yeah, that's pretty crass, quite frankly. I
Yeah,
don't see how you don't see that as someone doesn't see that as racist.
I
Um,
do.
yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that she did make this statement a week ago, which got a fair bit of traction on social media in Parliament. She did, we should note, I think at the start of the year, she did it. There was a hunger strike for an arms embargo. She did said she put out a statement saying she was participating in the hunger strike for a day. So that was, so that's some stuff in the direction of Palestine solidarity. Now, I did look to see if she'd been, so while she was going to go to this Israel embassy organized event, I looked to see if she'd been at any protest over the past year in Victoria. There have been weekly protests against Israel's genocide in Gaza. I couldn't find anything on that. And also, there's been regular protests in Ottawa. I couldn't find any suggestion that she'd actually been to a protest. So she was willing to go to the Israeli embassy event, but not any of the actual protests. So that, I think, is pretty stark. But can you
Especially to be standing next to, these officials that are affiliated with the Netanyahu government after just calling Netanyahu a war criminal a couple of weeks before. I mean, it's completely incoherent to go to an event organized by the Israeli government that way.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It seems pretty big dissonance of
She
of
had put out a statement, I think it was back in November of last year, where she was saying that, now is not the time to talk about Netanyahu's war crimes, that we should instead be pushing for a ceasefire. So it's very particular. Like her rhetoric is back and forth on this. It's very hard to follow. And, it strikes me as if she's playing both sides.
and we got to make this clear, playing both sides in the context of a probably 200,000 killed in Gaza if you take all the indirect deaths as well. Two-thirds of everything destroyed cropland, buildings. Like if you just take an environmental assessment of what's going on in Gaza, it's stunning. Obviously, it's an environmental disaster, right? There's just a story about all the asbestos in the buildings. They're expecting a comparable number of people dying from the cancer from the asbestos that's come out of the buildings as been killed directly, right?
Oh, yeah,
So you could anyway, you could take an ecological look at what's happening in Gaza, and then obviously Israel's doing something, starting that down that path with Lebanon at the same time, not to mention expanding its settlements in the West Bank, taking thousands, 10,000 Palestinians hostages in the West Bank, on and on and on, and then possibly leading us to a regional war, which could quite honestly escalate into a global war. Now, can you give us a little bit of the background? So this is not new. So she, Elizabeth May got behind Annamie Paul to be the leader, and there was a huge Palestine breakdown of the party over Annamie Paul and Noah Zatzman, her lead advisors, over the top pro-Israel positions back in 2021. Yeah, so can you tell us a bit about that? And also how she and the party blocked you from running, and people like Dimitri Lascaris blocked in your case, I believe, if I'm not incorrect. And in case of Dimitri, she threw her weight behind Annamie Paul to make sure that this sort of more pro-Palestinian voice wasn't elected. Can you give a little bit of that background?
Yeah, that's it. Well, look, support for Israel has been a long, raging debate within the Green Party of Canada, going back to 2016 when we had a debate amongst members about supporting boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the state of Israel. At the time, it was adopted by the majority, but Elizabeth May had threatened to resign if it was not overturned. And so they came to some sort of a compromise where the final text included the words boycott, divestment, and sanction, but not in the acronym BDS. But unfortunately, that policy never actually made it into the party platform or anything like that, and was sort of forgotten about at that time.
I want to just touch on this quick. So what happened in 2016 was there was a planned convention taking place in Ottawa. I think every 2 years the convention happened. There was a resolution, there's two resolutions before the convention that were put to members on an electronic poll, and they both passed, one around the Jewish National Fund and one around a partial boycott, divestment, sanctions resolution. Elizabeth May was able to kibosh, basically stop the JNF resolution from going forward. And then, but she kind of used up her political capital at the convention and pushing against the JNF thing. And then the next day, members refused to listen to her and voted in favor of the BDS, partial BDS resolution.
Yeah.
And then Elizabeth May forced a whole new convention, a special convention. The party spent $100,000 to organize this new special convention later that year in Calgary. And this was all just to deal with one single resolution that the members passed in electronic vote and then passed at the convention. And this is honestly one of the more remarkable incidents of recent Canadian politics, really. I mean, this is I just want to get those details out there, that she went to that incredible length 8 years ago to block, to subvert party democracy on behalf of Israel and to concede to Israel lobby backlash.
And it was really weird because I was at that convention in Ottawa, and as you mentioned, this resolution was adopted with overwhelming support, despite the fact that Elizabeth May had been speaking from the floor as a delegate in strong opposition to it. And at the end of that convention, she made a speech, that really gave the impression that she was going to accept like the outcome of this and everything. And everybody went home from the convention thinking that, well, she accepted it gracefully and that kind of thing. But when I opened my computer up a few hours later, there was a statement saying that, she will resign if this is not overturned and all that. So it was really quite a shocker. I don't know what happened in those few hours to have her change her position that way. But as you mentioned, like anytime that people in party politics, take a strong stand in favor of Palestinian human rights, there's a whole apparatus that goes into working to try and limit the political future of those people. So different times, like Elizabeth May, as you mentioned, supported Annamie Paul in the leadership race to succeed her before coming back. Annamie Paul was known for having a position of very strong support for Israel, campaigned on that during the leadership race, dismissed any questions about her support for Israel as being anti-Semitic, and ultimately ended up winning. But even then, when her chief of staff, I believe, or spokesperson, started calling Elizabeth May an anti-Semite and stuff like that for some very limited criticisms that she had made of Israel that did not even rise to the level of calling for sanctions or anything like that. It basically tore the party apart. And of course, there's a lot of factors in this, right? I don't think that it was only about like the Middle East. I think that Elizabeth May actually wanted to come back, and that destabilizing her successor was part of her plan to return to power, which she ended up succeeding in. But that's it. It's a little bit hard to follow, but certainly, like, her support for Israel is much stronger than her support for Palestine, in my view. And I don't see why that she needs to play sort of both sides of this when there's a genocide taking place. Like, regardless of what her stance has been previously, she should come to the realization now, given what we're seeing, given the ICJ case, and just the images and the proof that we're seeing about what's taking place. Her position should be revised. She should not be hanging out at the Israeli embassy, and she should certainly not be issuing statements, saying that certain lives are worth more than others. I am told that she deleted this statement from Facebook, at least after making it, but it's not clear to me whether she deleted this statement to distance herself from what was said in it, or simply to avoid some negative comments on Facebook and keep it private instead.
Yeah, I think that I wrote a piece back in 2016 titled "Could Christian Zionism Explain Green Party Leaders' Threats to Resign?" about Elizabeth May. And she did train to be a minister, Anglican, that has a long history of Christian Zionism. She's also, as that statement, she's expressed on multiple occasions what philo-Semitism. So there is some, I think, ideological elements going on here that go beyond just conceding to sort of the Israel lobby or conceding to power. But I think an important part of it is also when you look at her foreign policy more generally, it's not really very it's pretty establishment oriented. She's fallen into the swamp of Ottawa, the Ottawa foreign policy swamp, if you like.
Yeah,
And
it's like liberal light kind of.
exactly, liberal. She's expressed support for she participates in Erwin Kotler's Iran Accountability Week, where they call for sanctions on Iran. She's participated in these events with Erwin Kotler in the past, where they called for Leopoldo Lopez, the far right opposition figure in Venezuela, who was detained. So she has this history of being pretty aligned with kind of foreign policy establishment. But one element of that that's gotten attention recently, last couple of years, that you've looked at is the question of arms, her role, her support for the NATO proxy war, Ukraine, her support for sending weapons to Ukraine, which goes against official Green Party policy. Can you talk a little bit about that question as well?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, when the invasion started of Ukraine, that conflict really broke out. She came down 100% on the side of Ukraine and NATO and the NATO proxy war that's happening there. At one point, she was calling for, not expressing full support, should we say, for the sending of weapons to Ukraine. But very quickly, she changed her position and had met with the Canadian Ukrainian Congress to come out just days later, similar to what we were just talking about with respect to Palestine and Israel. First came out saying that, yes, maybe we should not send weapons. And then after a few meetings behind closed doors, came out like a week later saying, no, we're going to send the weapons and all that. And even going to the point of sort of like cheerleading for like the US $60 billion aid package that was sent to Ukraine. She was writing to her supporters on Sunday mornings there that It could not be done fast enough, that the Congress had to get together and send that money and those weapons as quickly as possible. I was also thrown out of the party for opposing the war in Ukraine. Um,
The
and
federal party. You're the leader of the
of the
Quebec
federal
Party.
party, yeah, that's it. Quebec Green Party is a separate organization, but it would be nice to be a member of the federal Green Party and be able to run for leadership. And I think that I would have given her a good run for her money, should I have been able to run against her for leadership on her most recent
And,
return.
that's where they threw you out, is to block you from being able to run against her.
Exactly. The moment that I had collected my nomination signatures to be a candidate in the leadership race, which she was running in, they, convened me to a meeting and essentially threw me out of the entire federal party, therefore completely blocking my chance of running in that leadership race. And unfortunately, even though I appealed the decision and the appeal came back in my favor, they still have not enacted those recommendations and reinstated my membership. So should there be a leadership race tomorrow, at the moment, I'm still unable to run.
And so she's taken these positions that align with Israel amidst the genocide, that align with sending weapons. I know when Joe Biden was in Ottawa, I think she met Joe Biden and was very celebratory about his, as you kind of alluded to, about his position on Ukraine. So they've worked to undermine people like you, people like Dimitri Lascaris, and while promoting someone like Annamie Paul, more establishment foreign policy. And then can you just tell us a little bit about some of these other characters? So apparently the co-president of the Green Youth is close with anti-Housefather and NATO Association of Canada. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
That's it. Well, there's a new youth co-president of the Green Party of Canada. His name's Jaden Braves. He's 16 years old, but he's going around on Facebook to all kinds of NATO meetings and meeting with different ambassadors and stuff like that. And it's very particular. He's gotten access to these NATO gatherings by being part of the Canada NATO Association, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to promoting NATO and their mission within Canada.
And is funded by NATO in part.
Okay, well, yeah. So I went to their website of this group, and one of their first news articles was a piece about how it's important to maintain the support of young people for NATO and for U.S. interventionism in the world. And they were saying that the younger people are far less likely than the older generations to support this kind of aggressive foreign policy. And so this report that they put out details, some of the reasons for that and some of the remedies that can be taken, to increase support for militarism amongst young people. So I found it very particular that, the Canadian NATO Association is focusing on young people's opinion like this, and that they're working with, this 16-year-old teenager, but who is co-president of the youth wing, right? The youth wing is for people all the way up to age 30, right? In the Green Party. And to be, putting out TikToks saying like, oh, these NATO leaders are making decisions that are important for our future, and then having tanks rolling by in the background, and going and praising like the purchasing of F-35 fighter jets by Canada and all this kind of thing. It's really insane that, this kind of organized promotion of, militarism and of NATO has made its way into the youth wing of the Green Party of Canada.
And again, my understanding is the Green founding principles is peace, is anti-militarism. So this is counter to what the stated philosophy of the party. So thanks a lot for coming on to discuss this. Obviously, we're going to be paying attention to Elizabeth May's foreign policy. It's troubling that even the left party is basically aligning with the official Canadian foreign policy, or very minimally challenging it. But thanks a lot for coming on, Alex. We'll leave it at that.
Sounds good.